One. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Lit Champs. This is actually volume round 4, special edition, overtime. We're fortunate tonight to have the gentleman in the group, which we are missing Kellen Massey tonight, but everyone else is here. But we're fortunate to meet the author of the book, if I only would have known. So again, I am Trey Hadrick, Mr. Lit, representing Lit Champs to you tonight. I would like the guys just to introduce yourselves again, quick, brief intro, and then we'll speak to the author. We can start with you, Troy.
How you doing, everybody? My name is Troy Swittenberg, father, husband, cousin, uncle, advocate. My background is in insurance, local resident, used to be a local resident of Norristown, live in Pottstown, Pennsylvania. Pretty much just was reading the book and was astonished by the information that I was given, and just want to learn some more. So it's good for me.
Melvin?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Melvin Morris. I'm, like Mr. Swittenberg said, a father, educator, a husband, but I'm truly moved and thrilled about, following up from the book. This was a wonderful book. It opened my eyes, not only as an educator, but also as a father. My wife is an educator. So, it's something that we understand that, we have to do ourselves, which I'm sure we'll, get into. But as parents, follow up on what our son is learning in school, but also, what we do at home. But again, I'm Mr. Morris, and I'm just really excited.
And they did, when they had Michael Jordan get introduced back in the 90s, right?
Yeah, short and sweet here. Jacques Golson. I have one son. The book was motivation because I'm trying to learn how to teach my son how to read, and that can be challenging for a parent. So yeah, that's my motivation in all this, just learning how to teach and then just educate and not being an educator, learning how to educate a kid. So
awesome. And myself, I'm Trey Hadrick, father, everything everybody else put on the table. I also have those titles, except for barber. I do try to cut myself once in a while, but Jock is my barber. So, I tell him that. But, on an honest note, I'm glad to be here. And this is just important. And we're not just talking about reading to your children, trying to teach them how to read. And without further ado, I'd like to let Faith Borkowsky introduce herself tonight.
Hi, everyone. It truly is a pleasure being here with all of you. I watched all the videos, and honestly, it was mesmerizing for me to watch fathers getting together and stepping out of the role that is the traditional role of the father, where usually it's the mom who gets involved in these types of discussions about reading and school, and I felt like I was from the outside looking into this really cool conversation, and I just loved it. I told Trey, this is something that needs to be out there, not just really kept a secret. It really needs to be out in the public. It was that good. So it's a pleasure to be here with all of you. My background is as a classroom teacher. I was an elementary school teacher. I have a bachelor's degree in elementary ed, special ed, a master's in reading, and I have a professional certification in administration and supervision. And the reason I went down this road to write books for parents is because as a teacher, I was so dissatisfied with what I was seeing. And then once I began to learn, which is a different story in itself, I felt the need to share this information because the schools were not changing fast enough. And the information was being kept a secret. And I wrote that down. I think it was Troy who said, the secret
is to keep it a secret.
Keep it a secret.
Yeah.
Yes, I told you I watched everything. And unfortunately, that's very true, Troy, that this has been a secret, the dirty little secret. And that's why I wrote my book, Failing Students or Failing Schools. That actually came before this book. And then parents started to tell me that, they wish they had known this earlier. And so that motivated me to write this book. And I wanted it to be something that could be picked up by anyone. So I kept it on a very, easy reading level, friendly enough to be impactful, but something that anyone could just pick up. So that's my background.
Well, thank you, Faith. But not but, excuse me, but thank you. Just to dive in, we're here to talk tonight to recap any questions from the gentleman for you, as well as questions for us. My honest question, just to throw it out there, is over the course of your time as an educator, Faith, what were some of the challenges that you saw that weren't happening that inspired you to write this book?
Right, so that's a really good question. Besides being a classroom teacher, I was a reading specialist, and I felt as though I couldn't reach the kids who needed it the most. I helped some kids, but the ones with profound difficulties, I did not feel effective. And so whenever I would go out, I would go into bookstores and I tried to always, get educated. I wanted to be educated. I wanted to always learn more. And at the time, the internet was not really what it is today. In order to get information, I went to the library or a bookstore. And then this book basically found me. It fell off the bookshelf and it opened my eyes to what I didn't know. And then I started to go for training and more training. And I just started to write in my journal. I had a diary that I would just write in every day about what was going on. And then years of doing this, I turned the journal into my first book. And it was really about letting people know the situation in school. So you said, well, what motivated you? That change doesn't happen quickly enough, Trey. That's what motivated me in writing both books, that the science has been there for years, and yet the schools do not respond quickly enough to this. And every year that goes by, we're losing kids. Kids are suffering. Parents are suffering, watching their kids suffer. So for me, it was just a calling. Enough is enough. Mm-hmm. And that's what motivated me to help, to let people know what was going on behind school walls. And that was actually my very first book before a publisher picked up the book, and then we renamed it.
And it's interesting that your first book before it was renamed was called Beyond School Walls, because I'm a firm believer that there are many educators out here who probably see those same eyes that you see beyond school walls. For whatever reasons, they don't always speak or teach, right? The families and children what they feel is the truth, because there's a lot of different binding, tied hands to do certain things. And I think it's amazing when you're able to get a message out there like this. And for the gentleman here, I think I can speak for them to say, like, it was just, we were like in awe, and when we were reading it was just like, this can't be like, is this not like in a bad way, but like, wow. But then we started thinking about scenarios. We talked about our own scenarios. Jock spoke about his, Troy spoke about his son. I spoke about my son, like all these scenarios. And it was like, it got this, we don't need to get a sample of 100 kids. We don't need to, we know what we know is real, and how do we make these changes? And I think that's like some of the stuff that Troy speaks about, how, like, where are we going to make these changes? How do we get parents to go forward, and to own their child's education?
Yeah, well, I think, well, the MVP, Jacques, was very vocal about saying it's the parents' responsibility. I'm not going to turn over control anymore to other people. And I was like, yes. And that doesn't necessarily mean always teaching your kid, but knowing enough to ask the right questions. I think that's very important. And if you can take control and you want to do it, yes, even teaching your own child. You know, I look at people who go buy cars. And you know what? When you go in and buy a car, you do not depend on a car salesman. You do your homework, right? You want to know, what is that car worth, the market value. You want to know what type of questions to ask. Yet people send their kids to school every day and they just trust that everything is happening, right? We have to put kids first. The same way you would take care to buy a home or a car and you wouldn't just turn over control to somebody else. You know, I know we're professionals and you want to trust professionals, but everyone really needs to be held accountable. And the only way you could do that is to be educated yourself about what goes on in school.
Gentlemen, any questions? Any questions for Faith? Any thoughts?
Yes, I have one general question. Well, took my first one, Trey. Thank you. But this one kind of piggybacks a little bit off of what Trey was talking about earlier. And the question is, when it comes to curriculum assessment and implementation of literacy, what are some of the biggest barriers you see, barriers and obstacles you see as far as of getting this true educational or true literacy implemented and set in place with all school districts?
Yes, so I think the reason you're not seeing this, Troy, happening in schools across the country is because in the teacher education programs, they haven't kept pace. So, you know, every time teachers are being trained to go into classrooms, they're being taught strategies that include memorization of whole words, cueing, having kids looking at pictures, getting their mouths ready and, you know, making a guess. And, you know, teachers are teaching kids the way kids shouldn't read. You know, they're actually giving them strategies the way poor readers read. So it becomes this cycle. So when you mention assessment, kids are being assessed on the wrong things. So there's an assessment that they use in school that's pretty common. And it is it's called the Fountas-Pinnell Benchmark Assessment System, BAS, F&P BAS, Fountas-Pinnell. Those are the authors of the program. It's all based on balanced literacy, on doing the wrong things, using these little books to look at pictures and make guesses. So, you know, my thing is, what is tested is taught. So if you use an assessment that assesses the wrong things, well, then the teachers are thinking, well, that's what I should be teaching, right? So they're teaching what the assessment is looking for. So unless we change the assessment, and you're so right about that, Troy, the assessment is crucial. We have to start with teacher training, the assessments that are being used. And I think you were the one who also said, wow, wouldn't it be something? I think it was in video 3 where you said something like, wow, if we all walked in asking the teachers about decodable books or phonological awareness. It was you, right?
Yeah.
Who said that? Right, what would they say? What would they say? They probably would be dumbfounded because they don't have the tools or the knowledge for the most part. I'm not saying all, but many.
With that being said, that's very scary for a parent who can't teach a kid how to read then. So how we know the system is failing and it's going to continue to fail us because for one, they're so far, the kids are so far behind that they can't even pick the system back up. So how is a parent supposed to teach the kid at home if the parent is struggling
That's the point.
at home too? And then they got to combat what they're being taught in school all day, and then come home and tell the kid like, no, don't do it this way, do it that way. So it's a ever going battle and a fight within your household and with the. You're making me not even want to send my kid to school. Like,
but you know what? That's very interesting because
I'm going to be fighting the school system on top of me teaching him how to
like what would you say to that? Like Jock has a great point. He's saying like, you know, you're teaching one way in school. Go ahead, you teach whatever. But when my son comes home, I'm going to teach him this way that I know has been successful for him. But then when he goes to school, he's not going to get tested on that. Like how does he combat that?
Yes. So that is a great point. That is an excellent point. I could tell you that when I tutor children, you know, Trey, I work with families too. Mm-hmm. It's not just the child. I'm always talking to the parents. I tell the parents to watch me. And so this way they're using the same types of strategies that I use. I will tell parents, you know what? If the homework is all about guessing and memorizing and all the wrong strategies, you're the parent. You tell the child, we're going to do it this way. And I'll work on trying to get change implemented in the schools. Because whatever is being done in the schools will take apart all the good work that we've done during a tutoring session. So it is a problem. It is definitely a problem because as soon as you see those leveled books coming home, you know, level A, level B, level C,
can you just explain? Yeah, just about level books, just so you know the people who are listening. Some people might not be familiar with level books.
Yeah. So leveled books, as opposed to what we talked about, to codable books. Let's just get the language clear. Mm-hmm. So a leveled book means it's on this gradient system from A to Z, starting with the easiest books first that have a few words on a page, and basically the pictures tell the whole story. And years ago, I don't even know if they still do it, teachers were instructing kids to do a picture walk before they even looked at the words. So they already knew the whole story before they even started to try to read it. And then these books go up in difficulty, but the first books, A, B, C, D, are completely worthless in terms of knowing if the child could read. They're all with high frequency words, you know, words that come up often.
Like sight words?
Yeah, you know, what we would call sight words, high frequency words. They're the words that come up often that teachers will send home these words for parents and say, oh, he has to know or she has to know these 20 words. Meanwhile, the kid doesn't even know the connection between letters and sounds. And so the message to that child is, oh, well, this is how I guess I'm supposed to read. I guess I just have to memorize a bunch of words and look at pictures. And then that all falls apart when they get to, you know, the end of second grade, third grade. Certainly by fourth grade, we call that the fourth grade slump, when these kids realize that they just can't do it. And the types of books that they read completely change. There are no more pictures in the books. And they have no idea how to sound out a word or a multi-syllable word. And so they can't keep up. And we're leaving all these kids behind. So getting back to what you asked me, until we could change what's going on in the schools, and that's why I'm so blown away by you, by all of you, that I really get the sense that you're going to take charge and say something and try to take action. But in the meantime, in the interim, if you were to see your child come home, like I think, Melvin, you have a 5-year-old, you said? Okay, so you're
Yes.
the perfect point where you could get your kid on the right track from the beginning with a 5-year-old. If you see your child coming home with guided reading books, where basically the words, like let's say it was a phrase like, I see the swing, I see the slide, I see the playground. And there's no way your child would know how to read playground unless the playground was there, a picture of a playground with the letter P. And so he makes an educated guess. Oh, there's a P, there's a playground, I'll throw it out there. Maybe he would even say park,
Mhm.
you know, and then the teachers are like, oh, well, that makes sense. That's a meaningful mistake. No, that's a mistake. The kid did not read the word playground.
Right.
The kid guessed. So this is what I mean about the wrong assessments, Troy. You know, if the assessment is saying, well, that's a good mistake because the meaning was similar, like playground and park, oh, that's okay. No, that's not okay. You really could start your child off on the right foot at this point and put your foot down about these types of books and not allow it. Now, decodable books mirror phonics instruction, starting with, you know, simple consonants and simple vowels and the letters that would match up with that, until they start getting into vowel teams and blending. And, you know, I don't want to use technical terms right now.
No, that's okay. Well, just
But
give an example. You know, if you say vowel teams, it's like A and I and
yes, like
Mhm.
AI, like in rain, or AY in day. That's not going to be taught as soon as your child enters school. But yet, in the word playground, there's an AY, there's an OU, there are blends like, you know, the GR blending to do group, right?
Mhm.
So, and the PL blending to do pluk. So you see what I'm trying to say, that there's no way that the child would be able to read that unless the child already had a sense of how to sound those words out. So,
And
you
that's
know,
why decodable books are so important and learning the
yes,
44
yes,
sounds.
yes, that's why they're so important, because at least the child would be getting books that would be a mirror of what he or she was learning to match up with that. And then a child who doesn't need those books anymore, well, then put that child in any book he wants to be in. But until that child could really lift any word up off the page with a high degree of accuracy and fluency, that child should not be guessing all around a book. You know, there are kids being sent for vision therapy. And you would say, well, why vision therapy? Because their eyes jump all over the page trying to get meaning from a picture or context instead of reading across lines of words. There's nothing wrong with that kid's eyes. We're
Mhm.
training them to have problems. I'm not saying some kids don't have vision problems,
But
but
the percentage is very small. That's one thing we see all these.
right.
Not to cut you off, but just to you
Yeah,
know
please.
your statement. But we see these statistics and we don't realize that they could be a lot better, right? And we don't realize that when we say, you know, X amount of kids could read if they were taught properly, that is so true, right? It would not be what you see in your self-contained special education classes, you know, the labeling, you know, it's so many things that are just done wrong because the foundation has not been set right, you know. And you gave a great example with the playground and you know, all those things you broke down that word, like the PL, the GR, the AY, the OU, the ND, like it's so many things you have to know. Otherwise, you are just guessing. And if you're going to guess now, you're going to guess later, right? So we want to fix that
It's a
immediately.
habit. It's a
Mm-hmm.
habit. And you see, it's almost like betting, right? When the child is very young, well, it's a good chance that child will guess correctly because there are so few words on the page and the pictures tell it all. But then if that child keeps using those same strategies, it's like any gambler, right? All of a sudden, you keep doing that, the gambler's going to have more losses than wins, right? That's what happens as they go up in the grades, that it becomes more and more challenging to be able to read if they continue to use the same faulty strategies.
Sure.
Yes.
Just just any questions, any thoughts, Melvin? Any questions or?
Yeah. Well, since you was talking about decodable books, I don't mean to cut y'all off, fellas. Y'all guys keep going on questions that I have, so I just want to continue on with that just a little bit more. My second question that I had, decodable books. What is the history behind decodable books, and is this a larger growing segment within the whole education realm or whatever? This should be like the fastest growing segment as far as like book buying, curriculum, teaching, or whatever. Can you just give us a little bit of background on it? Like, this is something that just started within like the last 20 years, or is this something that's been in existence from the beginning of time, but just been neglected on behalf of educators, unions, teachers unions, Department of, Education, going all the way up to, the top of the food chain. Can you give us some background on decodable books?
Yeah, well, I have to tell you, there used to be readers like 100 years ago that were based on phonics, that were these phonics readers. And look, even when I started teaching in 1986. And the school where I began in had a program that was based on sounds. And they had these sound cards up on the walls. And it was like beating heart, to learn the book sound. I'm just giving you an example. And just when I came in, because in the 80s is when there was this huge movement for whole language. That's what we called it then, whole language. And it was the idea that basically reading is natural. You give kids books, you provide them with books, and you surround them with language and books. Everyone will just pick up reading. Like you pick up a cold, you pick up reading. And so when I came in, they were pulling these cards off the wall. And those readers, those basal readers, they were called open court readers, were being put to the side. But all the older teachers, now I was 21 years old at the time when I started teaching, those older teachers were holding on to those basal readers, shutting the door and doing what they knew. And here I was, this young teacher. I didn't have children of my own at the time, just came out of college. I never subbed. I got a full-time job immediately. Basically, in the 80s, at that time, it was easy enough. I was in New York City. You went for a job, that was it. And here I was coming in, basically thinking that, well, I'll just do what I was taught. And I didn't know any better. And so this started years and years and years ago. But I would say, Troy, the big change was in the late 70s and 80s. And then the scores plummeted, right? Like it was terrible. All these scores started to go down. But instead of getting rid of this, they just rebranded it and called it balanced literacy, which is what is known now in the schools, balanced literacy.
And
the original term was whole language.
And I want Jock and Melvin to also
Yes.
give comments, but it's crazy when I think about that era, right? And you think about civil rights, and you think about the crack epidemic in the country, and so many things that affected, especially in the Black and brown communities, in all communities, but particularly the Black and brown. So we were dealing with some of those community and personal, struggles. And then the education changed, when Jock talks about parents not being able to help at home,
right?
And you're changing it to a harder method for kids to read. It's just like, it goes back to what we said a couple of weeks ago, John, like it's a lose-lose. It's like it's set up to fail. Like all these these households. So Jock, I know you had a question or you had a comment, and then Melvin, you'll be next.
Yeah. So my thing is, I understand the bigger picture of schools. I don't think I'm gonna really get the sufficient help that I'm going to need there. Not saying it's not going to help me, but I want to be stronger and enforce it more stronger in my household. I'm starting with decodable books. I actually get my first order tomorrow. But is there any other grounds I should stand on with starting out, like trying to just implementing a good system at home as a parent, and to be able to teach other kids? Because, like I said, I understand the power of being able to teach a kid how to read is greater than anything. It's a good thing. So it's like I want to be more hands on with trying to teach others how to read. So where should I start as a parent?
So here's what I'm thinking. I know that the book is finished, but my goal didn't end with the book. My goal really is to try to get communities to really start taking a stand. So if you would like, I could work with you, Jacques, and all the men here, maybe do a little bit of a training with you to show you how to do this, how you can help your own child, and then you could pay it forward. I mean, I would be happy to do that. That's just something to think about. We could Zoom.
Yeah.
And I could start showing you how to get started. And I think your barbershop could be a real wonderful place to start focusing on. I would love to make that the hub of information, have a set of decodables that would stay in your barbershop so that fathers and sons could start learning and seeing what that might look like. I just see that that's kind of the way to bring people to the library, because they're not going to go there themselves. Like you said, if a parent struggles, that's not the place where they're going to go first, but they are
Right.
going to go to your barbershop.
Right.
And are going to go to a church, or they are going to go to a laundromat or a supermarket, or any of these places that are day-to-day places that they need to go to, where they could get some information that could lead them to a resource hub like a library.
And it's also a trust factor, right? There's
Yes.
trust built from the community when you go to your barber. I mean, Jock and I, we actually discussed this yesterday, about the trust that you build when you go to the barbershop. I mean, a barber is like an educator / counselor within the community,
Yes.
and you can disclose almost any and everything to a barber. And I said, they probably know more about everything that's happening in this community or in any community, depending on where that barbershop is located. So I said it to say, like, people trust and believe in those positions, the beauticians, the barbers, and others. And I think those are definitely a good place to start, because when he says, hey, decodable books, that's probably going to be gold with a lot of people. How do I get decodable books?
Yes.
And proof in the pudding when he shows what his son can do. People are going to definitely want the same.
Yes.
Manny,
At 7 years
something?
old, your child already started with the memorization of words, right?
Yep.
And I heard you talking. So that will have to be a change in mindset for your child, right? To get your child started thinking, well, we read left to right. We read through a word. We don't read around a word. We read through a word. So these are the types of things that we could talk about and follow up. And you mentioned the trust factor. Trey, why do you think that I couldn't do this, what you did? Because here I am, like I said, a white middle-aged woman. Would I really be able to have an impact in your community the way you men could have an impact? No. Who would trust me right away? And it's the truth. I'm saying the truth.
Mm-hmm.
It's that's the reality. So as much as I want to do the right thing, I can't just walk in and people saying, who is this white woman, telling me, the right way to do this? No, it's a trust that we build when we start to learn from each other, the same way you and I built a friendship around helping Ernesto.
Yep. Yep.
And so I think that's why all of you men need to be able to pay this forward in your own community, because someone else doing it is not going to have the same effect. The same way, Trey, the way you ran this book discussion was beautiful. It was music to my ears. I loved every minute of it.
Thank you.
I did.
Thank you.
I just have a comment, but then also a question after that. I would just like to say, from working with my own son, before this book, I had no idea, to be honest with you, about the Codal books, or maybe I did, but just it's been so far gone. But the fact that my son, learning how to read, but then also, or should I say, learning his letters, but then also the sound. He takes a tutoring class on, a couple days out the week, and to see him sight words come up on the screen, and he's able to, recite them, but then realizing it's all for memorization. But then when I put up an alphabet chart, and it feels good as a parent to see your son able to actually, say the sounds of the letters, realizing that, I understand now how important it is for you to actually know the sound instead of just learning just the letters in school, because you could just put up a letter and the kid will say, D, but really it's P, or they'll say another letter, C, but really it's B. But also what you said in your book, where the student was pointing, where the doctor told the kid to point at the letter or the color and it was red, but he also pointed to blue, but he said it's red again, which is, it just touched me, to be honest with you, because I look at it as, my own personal experience, just wanting my son to understand and know how to, again, as we all want our kids to know how to read. I might be going all over the place, excuse me.
No, you're not. No,
But,
I hear you.
But also I was reading where it talks about cursive writing, how I'm not sure, but it's not in school as much as it used to be when we were growing up. How important is cursive writing into, teaching kids how to learn how to actually know the letters that they're reciting?
Okay, so a lot there. So I'll start with the last part first about cursive writing, and then I'll work my way backwards. So it's important, especially for kids who might have some learning issues, because the letters are connected, there is less of a chance of reversing letters. So if you've seen kids who only start trying to look at letters as a picture, they're drawing a picture, and many of them draw their letters. They don't know how to form their letters, half of them. I mean, from what I see, the kids I see, many of them don't know how to form their letters. It's from bottom up, it's all over the place. They don't even know how to hold a pen or a pencil.
My son was one of them.
Yes. So, and many times that goes along with reading issues. So cursive has gone out of favor, Melvin, because now we have computers. And so there was this mindset, well, when kids get older, they'll just be using a keyboard all the time. And what science is now showing is there is a real connection between what the hand does and what the brain is learning. It reinforces. So number one, handwriting, whether it's manuscript or cursive, is very important. Very, very important. So, Jacques, I don't know if your child struggles with handwriting, whether forming letters, that is something to also think about. We could talk about that another time. At 7 years old, you will clearly see if your child is doing bottom up. If you see bottom up letters or letters where your child has to stop and think about how to form a letter, that's a sign of there possibly being a problem in learning letters. As far as cursive goes, it is helpful for those kids later because one, it's faster to get your thoughts down when letters are connected, right? There's a flow to it. And also they're less likely to reverse or make mistakes about identifying those letters. Because even if you don't use the letter names right away, right? No one says you're not going to learn letter names, but we're talking about using sounds first and really, recognizing the letters and knowing your sounds in order to push them together. That's the important thing. So I would hope that schools are starting to turn the clock back to bring cursive back. I mean, I tell parents this all the time, make that a summer activity, teach your kid how to write in script. There are lots of books out there to show you how it's done, because it might not be done in school. These kids can't even sign their names. They have to sign their name on a check. They don't even know how.
Right.
That
right.
pathetic. They
But
can't
I think,
read cursive writing either.
but one thing I'm a push back, even though I 100% agree with the cursive, but I think since so many things are technology sound, I would say, like paying items, paying for a bill. Someone might say they don't have to sign a check anymore. They don't have to, right? Not saying I agree. However, I think what you said was so important was the learning of the hand, basically hand-eye. We say in sports, hand-eye coordination, right? That hand-eye coordination from writing that letter and showing that you know it, not just from seeing it in the book, but you can write it down also is a sign of how well you'll probably be able to read. I think that's so powerful, to say that's the correlation, and going back to some stuff Jock says about taking control, you gave a solution. You said, hey, if they don't teach it in your school, go get a book, do it in the summer, do it another time. Like, don't just wait for it, and I think that is the thing that is powerful.
It's sad. Yeah, it's sad that you have to take control like this, but I could tell you in, a white affluent community, it's not, and we've had this discussion too, when it's in failing students or failing schools, it's not like the schools are doing something radically different. It's that the parents who have the means will go out and get the help. They will get their kids tested. They're going to get, classifications that push certain programs into the schools. So it's not like the schools are doing something so different in one neighborhood from a different neighborhood. It's that the parents will just take an active role in getting the help that the kid needs by paying for it. I mean, I hate to say it, but that is what happens. We talked about tutoring centers all over the place. You know what? There are only businesses where there's a need, right? Look at a barber shop. There's a need. There's going to be a barber shop. If there's a need and people will pay for the service, it's going to be there. Businesses are not going to open in areas where people don't necessarily have the means to pay for a service. Supply and demand. And unfortunately, kids suffer. That's why the library is so crucial in this, because that could level the playing field by having a resource there for information. It really can.
Any thoughts, gentlemen? We have about, a little less than 10 minutes. Any thoughts, any questions?
I'm locked and loaded, Trey. I'm sorry.
Let's go. No. I'm just, just making sure everybody gets a chance. Go ahead. Yep.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Y'all just went on one part. My first question I was going to ask before you just jumped on the topic was why does traditional learning work for some children more so than others or whatever? But the question I wanted to get to first, prior to that, you pretty much answered the question prior to that one. This question was talking about like the early intervention. So early interventions with the pediatricians. Why do you think more don't veer more towards the searching for like dyslexia and all the early cognitive learnings that can be that leads to some of the early intervention with the school?
All right, so a couple of things there. My feeling, first of all, is that we can't even tell truly how many kids would have dyslexia because the schools are, the way they're teaching, it's like artificially induced dyslexia, right? It's like making kids struggle the way they are teaching kids. So the point is, if we start classifying all these kids from the get-go, my goodness, we're going to have so many kids with this dyslexia classification that the schools would be overwhelmed by it. That's number one. Number two, the pediatricians don't know much about reading. Trust me, they do not know a lot about literacy or dyslexia. That's why they're not having these conversations. In my book, my feeling was that if we just get pediatricians to first learn, that would be the first interaction a parent has to start learning about language and literacy and dyslexia. But they first have to know themselves. Mm-hmm. That's the problem. There's such a lack of information out there. And then parents depend on these professionals to help. They can't help if they don't know. But I do think that if we start trying to, get everybody on board with testing, which is something that's being done now, to get early screening for everyone. Yes, I think there's some value to it, but really, if they're learning in preschool to memorize words, and then they go into kindergarten and they're getting this screener, well, they've already been subjected to some of the wrong things. And then we're going to put a label on a kid. That's the problem. It's a whole, system that needs to be revamped. So I don't know if I answered your question exactly. The problem is that kids from a very early age are being taught the wrong way. So we can't say they're all dyslexic. We don't have over 60% of kids in this country with a learning disability. That's not even what a learning disability is. There should only be 5% or not even 5% of the kids who have profound difficulties. And I mean profound difficulties. 95% of the children should be able to read adequately. Wow. That's a fact.
John, Melvin,
I'm sorry. I mean,
go ahead.
I'm just be honest with you. I just don't get it. I know we had this conversation, so many times. I really just don't understand how the system knows that there's something wrong, but we choose to just do it the opposite way. It's like you said, I don't know if I'm comparing this correctly. It's like the codables are organic, food, and, the artificial is, you providing students with something, teaching them a habit that's wrong when it's bad for their body, and we're actually doing a disservice to our kids.
Yep. Melvin, I just posted a blog that I did a while ago. And the blog was really about just what you said. And I compared it to dark chocolate M&Ms. So they say that dark chocolate is supposed to be healthier for you. Okay, well, dark chocolate M&Ms, junk food is junk food. Yeah. Okay, let's look at it that way. Junk food is junk food. The diet that they're getting in school is junk. So even if there's a little bit of phonics that's embedded in all this junk food, it's still not healthy. But that is advertising for you, right? Oh, like dark chocolate is now healthy. Well, I'm sorry, dark chocolate M&Ms will never be a healthy food. Yeah, just
Wow.
not making it.
Wow. So much to learn, so much to learn, so much to understand, but so much to move on, and that's definitely the thought and the mission going forward. Jock, any thoughts before we wrap it up? Any last thoughts from you?
No, it's depressing to hear like how the system is doing our younger generation. But the only thing I can just say is get involved, parents. Make sure you help your kids, learn with them, but fight the fight with them. That's all.
Yeah, and don't be depressed. Don't be depressed because now that you have some information, knowledge is golden. And now when you start asking questions, I'll go back to what Troy said, about, imagine going in and starting to ask these questions. Well, and I think it was Trey who said, well, they better have some answers, right? Or do things differently. Something has to change, because if enough parents start asking questions and they can't answer this, they're going to have to start doing something. It's really starting to make change from the outside. Because, Jock, I'm going to tell you, from inside school walls years ago, it was very hard. And this is why it kept going on and on and on. But if communities become aware that there's a problem and understand on some basic level, if the book did that to raise these questions, well, now, you know what? Schools are going to have to answer to that at a community school board meeting, or a classroom teacher or a principal. It's going to get things in motion going. But like I said, we could continue and try to have a father training, father or men. Not everybody here is a father, but some type of real men read training, because I am so blown away by all of you. You guys really epitomize what a father figure, what a real man should do. Get involved with their kids' education. Do not depend on a woman to handle all that. And quite honestly, I do think the schools respond differently when a man shows up too. I really do. I've been at a lot of CSE meetings. That's Committee on Special Education. And I've seen it myself. When a mom goes in there by herself, it's different from when there's a man in there. And it's just the world we're in. So I do think having you involved would be a very good thing.
Awesome. Yes. Well, we want to thank you, Faith, for your time and just being able to meet with us, and again to share some nuggets outside of the book. With just some good information, some toolkit items that we can use and go forward with. I think a good solution would be to maybe meet again, in some time, and figure out how do we pay it forward, as you said, and teach others, because that's the goal, right? It can't just stay in this conversation. It needs to go forward, and others need to learn this, because if not, it won't be that avalanche ripple effect. It won't happen unless others are on board and have that knowledge. I say this on behalf of everybody. Like, we truly thank you for your time, your expertise, and allowing us to quiz you tonight, right? Ask some questions and just get a feel for some things.
It's my pleasure. My pleasure. And I look forward to us meeting again. And I do think the barbershop is really a great hub for this information to start spreading. I really do.
Yep. So just to wrap it up, and just want to say thank you to everybody who's listening in, who's going to watch this recording. And, thank you for all the individuals who give us feedback, the positive and the negative. We enjoy it all because it allows us to grow as individuals. We will be back maybe in a few weeks with another recording, some other information regarding education, but Lit Champs will definitely continue. Maybe some one-on-one interviews that I'll do, as well as the guys will come back as well. So thank you everybody for listening. Talk soon. Take care.